Welcome back to this episode of the Becoming Immune Confident podcast. Hi, I'm Dr. Kara, and I am just thrilled to welcome our guest for this week. We have Lindsay Gutierrez with us. She is originally from Midwest City, Oklahoma, and she dually resides in Nashville, Georgia, and Fort Meade, Maryland, with her active duty Air Force husband, Anthony, and her many fur babies. She is a veteran of the United States Air Force and works for the Department of Defense. It was through her work in the military and outside experiences that Lindsay was able to find her calling as a social advocate. After separating from the military in 2016, Lindsay first became involved in pageants to bring awareness to veterans' needs and issues. Lindsay has held the titles of Ms. Veteran America, Ms. Georgia U.S. Continental, Miss Georgia American Women of Service, Miss Georgia South, Mrs. Hira Honeybee, Miss Georgia Military Star Honorary Veteran, and Mrs. American Elegance. Lindsay attended undergrad at Lee University in Cleveland, Tennessee, and she continued her graduate studies at the University of Oklahoma with a master's in human relations and Arizona State University with her master's in social work. She's an active volunteer in her community and is an ambassador for various living organ donor foundations. Her favorite quote to live by and encourage others with is, "Be the change you wish to see in the world." I am thrilled to get to have this conversation with you and share it with our listeners, Lindsay. But thanks so much for taking time to talk today.
Thank you so much for having me.
I would love to hear a little bit more about your story. How did you end up kind of where you are doing what you're doing?
Oh, gosh. So I guess the shortened version, because it could go on forever, it feels like, with our person's stories. But really what happened was after I graduated college, I always kind of knew that I wanted to be involved in something. What that something was, I had no idea. I just knew I wanted to be out in the world and doing something I feel like to make a difference. So I had majored in theater. I wanted to do special effects makeup. So I moved to California in 2009. And I was trying to make it work. I really wanted to work on special effects makeup. I wanted to get into the industry, and everything was not falling into place at all. So I thought, well, what can I do? Let me try to figure out something else I can do to really help me get moving forward in my goals. I felt like everybody else in my life was getting where they wanted to, except me. So I ended up joining the military a year later. And then that's really where things kind of kicked off. I served for 6 years in the Air Force. And it was during that time, a few deployments anyway, that I started finding more about social work and how that could become a part of my life. And so I didn't know at the time it was called social work. My master's at the time I was going for was in human relations. And so I was like, well, I feel like there's something additional that I can go a little bit forward with that. So I decided, let me check into this after I separated from the Air Force. And then that's when I got involved with a lot of military veteran organizations and just doing advocacy work, because my separation from the military wasn't easy. I was really trying to find my new niche and what I was supposed to do. And I had established this life for the last 6 years in the military. And now all of a sudden I'm out. What do I do? So that's how I started getting involved with military nonprofits and advocating for women veterans specifically. And then a few years later, I decided to embark on organ donation. Not really something that crosses many people's paths at all. It's not something I woke up and was like, I think I'm going to donate my kidney today. But I was actually involved in a pageant a couple of years ago. And it was through that pageant, I learned of somebody who was needing an organ, specifically a liver. And he needed some testing and all these other things that needed to go along with that. And immediately knowing I was O positive, I said, well, I can donate to anybody, universal donor. I can do whatever I need to do. And thankfully, this person was able to get the treatments that he needed, but that stuck in my mind. And then a couple of months down the road, in January of 22 is whenever I started finding out more of how I could really start to become an organ donor. So it was through various channels and processes. So I found an organization called Donor Outreach for Veterans. They specifically connect donors to veteran recipients who are needing a kidney. So I thought, well, that's close to my heart, especially being a veteran. went through the testing and everything through Mount Sinai. It's the most intense testing I've ever been through. Things that probably people wouldn't normally go through ever in their life. But I was like, okay, this is good to know, at least for my own benefit. I know if I'm healthy, if there's anything medically I need to care for myself, nothing popped on any test. So that was good. And we moved forward with the donation. And so I donated on May 25th of 22. Last March, we hiked Mount Kilimanjaro with a group of other organ donors and recipients and medical teams from UCLA. So it was a really big group of people, different supporters around Tanzania and then here in the US. And then I actually got confirmation a couple of days ago that I am cleared to donate my liver. And so I will be donating my liver on April 30th.
Oh, amazing. Can you share a little bit about kind of what that process is like, kind of going through the testing, maybe for someone who's like, oh, I'm a little bit curious, but that's, so that maybe they have a better idea of what to expect.
Right. So it's very intensive. It's not scary by any means. It doesn't hurt other than just the blood that you have to give. So I would say if you're afraid of needles, this is probably not the best process for you. If you don't care about needles and you're pretty tolerant of that, it's going to be an okay process. So I gave a ton of blood. That was originally where everything started, was just to make sure that all of my levels, I don't even know where to start. Tons of levels. I'm sure being a doctor, you can imagine there's tons of levels and panels that I have to go through.
Absolutely.
And so everything was evaluated. You name it, it was on this panel that had to be looked at. So the panel came back clear. After that, I had to give a urine test. And so I gave several urine tests. They wanted to make sure that everything was good with my urine, that my kidneys were functioning as they should within the ranges that were normal. That came back clear. I continued on with the process. And then I actually physically went to Mount Sinai and I had a whole day of testing there. So I had an EKG, an MRI, a CT with contrast. Oh my gosh, what else? An X-ray. So I had all types of different testing that was really checking, an ultrasound. So I had lots of things that were going on that day. And then of course I spoke to all the different specialists within the donor team. And then they met the following week and reviewed the different people that were going through the process to figure out if they would be a good candidate or not. And then, of course, for kidney donation, it's very similar. So now that I had gone through the testing and everything was good there, a little bit different for liver because it's a much more intensive and invasive surgery than donating my kidney was. At least with the kidney, you're taking up the whole organ. With the liver, you're cutting part of it off. And so right now, I don't know if my recipient is going to be a child, which could be up to 20 to 30% of my liver. If it's an adult, it could be between 60 and 65%. So the recovery is also going to be a lot more intensive too. So basically, it was the exact same process with the different testings. It's the recovery that's going to be a little bit different from the kidney to the liver. So with the recovery for liver, though, I am going to have a little tube to make sure, because I still have part of my liver left, but just to make sure I don't have any bile leakage or internal bleeding, I'll have that duct there for a few days until I'm fully discharged. And then that'll be removed and I'll have a pretty decent sized scar on the right side, right underneath my rib cage. So it's apparently going to look like a hockey stick. So it'll be a cool scar to have. And then I have for my kidney, though, I have a tiny C-section. It's about the width of my fist. And it's almost where a woman would have a C-section for a baby. That's where mine is located. And then I have 4 laparoscopic on my side, which is where the robot did its thing. And then my surgeon actually took out the kidney and sewed me up. So that's kind of the differences between the two.
That's incredible. I have peripherally followed patients who are on their path to getting on the list. And so it's fascinating to hear that your experiences of donating, they do echo what those patients are going through in many ways too. And then, the part that kind of remains unsaid, but where my brain as an immunologist is going and nerding out a little bit, is a lot of that blood that was taken from you and then from them too is going to figure out if you two are a match. Because just as you mentioned with having O-type blood, it makes you a universal donor, but that also, there's several additional layers to that. So that's kind of like the first check. And then there's a few other checks with something called your HLA and some other markers too, because the better match you have, then that recipient hopefully will be able to have a longer ability to use that amazing gift, and hopefully not need as much medication to suppress their immune system too. Yeah.
That's correct. It is pretty fascinating just to see all the different levels of testing that go into it, because it's not just one part. I mean, just because you could be a match doesn't mean that you're going to be a good match for that person. So it's really interesting to see everything that goes along with it.
I'm always amazed by those stories that will come out every once in a while about the donor chains that will go through where, someone makes a donation and then they're able to kind of find different matches along the way. And it is like this, and this is the terrible analogy, but at Starbucks when someone pays it forward, like this is that on like a million times, right?
It's very, very similar. Yeah.
The logistics are kind of similar. The magnitude, a little different.
Well, it's actually funny that you bring that up, because that is kind of what happened in the process of my kidney donation. So originally I was paired with a veteran. His name is James. And so I was paired with James. And then it turns out I wasn't a match. And so we were kind of going back to the drawing board of different things. For whatever reason, I wasn't able to donate with him. And so few things that logistically just weren't working out, but it ended up I was a match to another gentleman named Kevin. And so things were going along between me and Kevin as far as I didn't know that's who it was at first. I just knew that it was going to be somebody. And then it turns out there was somebody else that came along, and his name was Reggie. And so Reggie was actually the one I donated to, but him and his wife were wanting to go through the process together. She wanted to donate to him. She wasn't a match to him, but she was a match to Kevin. So even though I was paired to Kevin, I donated to Reggie so that she could donate to Kevin. Yeah. So it worked out well, and they're doing amazing. So it's really fascinating to see how even taking from somebody else, a completely different person that you probably never would have met in your entire life, and they are thriving and doing really well. Everything is great. Like almost to the point, I believe, to where Reggie was telling me not too long ago that his doctors are a little bit surprised because it's doing so well that even the rejection medicine is making him feel weird. And so when he doesn't take it, he feels great and everything's wonderful. So it's like, it's working too well to an extent, I guess, which like what, I mean, I guess that's a good thing. So I know that they're going to figure it out. It's really amazing just to see how that happens.
Yeah, absolutely. I know, prior to kind of our conversation here, most of my kind of more like personal experiences, I had an uncle pass away unexpectedly. And, I think he was probably in his mid to later 40s. And kind of through that process, he was able to give life to some other folks. At the time, I was in high school or college. And so it was, it was just this, this bright spot out of a really tragic situation. And so this is really refreshing to kind of reframe my thoughts around organ donation kind of in just this wonderful giving way.
Oh, that's really special. It can definitely touch so many lives. And I always encourage people, whether you're an angel donor or you're a living donor, organ donation really does make an impact, and it makes waves that you'll never be able to see.
I love that term, angel donor. That's new to me. I like that a lot. Thank you.
I found it holds more meaning, I feel like.
Absolutely.
Because you are giving a gift. You're donating so much of yourself, and only angels can, I feel like, would be able to do that. Somebody who's really that wanting to give. So I don't remember where I heard that from, but I heard it and I was like, that stuck with me too. It really meant something to hear that.
In addition to kind of your work and advocacy with organ donation, you also have had experiences with PTSD and TBIs. And could you share a little bit more about?
Sure. So while I was in the Air Force, it was during one of my deployments to Djibouti. And so that was I think that was around August timeframe, August 2014 to about end of January, early February 15. So we were there for about 6 months total. So that's important to the story because this situation happened early on in the deployment. And it was probably maybe September, October timeframe, I think. Where we worked was different than where we slept. And so we were protecting a different location. And so every day we would have to go off base to have to pick up the different meals and bring it back to where we were working. So on this one particular night, me and one of the other sergeants I was with, we were assigned to that particular area. And it was about 4:30 in the morning. And because I worked nights. And so we were finishing up an exercise with some of the people that we were with. So we were really hyped up. Our adrenaline was going. So we were just trying to calm ourselves down. And we got in the car. And all of a sudden, I kind of had this feeling. And I don't know if it's like a sixth sense or if it was, I really do feel like it was God telling me, prepare. So I felt like, what if this is the moment where there's an accident? And not a second later, the vehicle started fishtailing because it's all gravel road. There's no paved road or anything where we were at. And so it's completely dark too, because we're out in the middle of nowhere. So there's no light. So all we could feel was exactly what was going on. Next thing I know, the vehicle is rolling. And so it's probably 2 or 3 rolls down. Thank goodness it wasn't this massive cliff, which was there where we were at. They did have those. But thank goodness we just rolled a couple of times down this hill. Mm-hmm. But it was enough because it made a huge impact because we were rolling onto boulders. So we land right side up. Thank goodness none of us were actually physically hurt on the outside. We didn't have any cuts or anything, but I immediately knew, okay, we need to call for medical help. So I got on the phone, the little cell phone that we had. I called our sergeant, told him what was going on. He immediately rushed everybody down there, and they got medical to us. And then we were escorted to the actual base where we were living at the time and got seen at the clinic there. The challenge was that you're in a deployed location. So you have very limited resources, unless they had flown us to Germany. I believe it was Landstuhl, the hospital there. There really wasn't anything that we could do. So basically it was treat ourselves. And because it wasn't my first concussion, I knew the side effects. I had my self body care training. I had gone through all these trainings before. I knew this is a concussion because I had sensitivity to light. I had this excruciating headache. So I knew there was a lot going on there and I needed to take care of myself. So somehow I walked from where I was sleeping all the way to the clinic again to have this documented and recorded. Because at the time, the concussion hadn't kicked in. I probably shouldn't have gone to bed that night, but I was just in that kind of state of mind where I was like, I am exhausted. I just have to go to bed. So I basically powered through for the next 6 months, trying to figure out and how to cope with what was going on. At the time, I didn't think it was a TBI though. I just knew this is a bad concussion. I'm going to live through it. I'm fine.
Yeah.
So years later though, it wasn't until years later after I was separated from the Air Force that I realized this was a TBI. And it was probably in 2018 or 19, I was diagnosed by the VA with a traumatic brain injury. And so it took all those years, almost 5 years before I was truly diagnosed. Although I had all this intuition and this feeling of something isn't settling right. I know that there's something chemically wrong going on in my head, but how do you articulate that to somebody who has no idea? You can't see it on an X-ray or an MRI or a CT. None of that shows up. I was like, unless I'm dead and they're looking at my brain that way, there's really no way to tell what's going on. So I felt really invalidated with all of my feelings that I had going on, but I knew that there was something there. So I just kept trusting myself and be like, I'm going to find somebody. I'm going to find a neurologist who's going to listen to me. And thank goodness I did. I had a great neurologist at the VA who finally heard me and got me the treatment that I needed. And so now I realize just because somebody is going through something and you can't see it doesn't mean that something isn't there. Really listen. And if it's one thing I'm so glad of is I had doctors that listened to me finally whenever it was that time. And now I have the utmost respect for doctors who really do listen to their patients and have that conversation and talk to them instead of just saying, well, I'm going to treat you or here's what you have. Here's the medicine for it. She really listened to me and got me the attention that I needed. She heard me.
I think that in my mind, that's the key to so much of all the, the issues we have in healthcare. If we could go back, go to this place where those human to human relationships and conversations are able to happen. And there's the time and the space, both, actual time and actual space, but also the mental bandwidth and making sure that, one thing I've only had little sprinkles of working with VA doctors during my training. The training program I had just had a little bit of that experience, and I loved it. But one of the things that I really appreciated about that experience was seeing that the pace of the work there was steady. It wasn't super rushed. And the docs that I work with had time to talk to their patients. And I think that has stayed with me kind of all of these years. Yeah. And if only we could take bits and pieces, it's more than bits and pieces, but take that to, to being able to have those. Could you imagine if we had those, an hour with our primary care doctors, to get to know us and go through all the things and talk about even, some of the things you mentioned, like self-care and wellness and nutrition and exercise and these things that are really critical to preventing problems versus that, this paradigm of just here's a pill or treat it. Here's a surgery.
Yeah. It's good to see that has shifted in so many decades, because in my job, I go around and I do talk to people. I'm a social worker, but I do some investigations as well in my role, just trying to get down to the bottom of what's going on with this particular applicant that we have coming in. And so I actually had a case where I had to go and talk to some doctors for a residency program. And it was amazing to see how they even said themselves, medical care has changed so much even since they were in school. And now it's so focused on the self-care, the wellness, making sure that you're getting the adequate sleep and you're feeding your body the right things. And to know that there's people out there, especially whenever I was going through the situation being a social worker, I was like, I know I need to advocate for myself. How am I going to be heard? And it's frustrating to not be heard. But when all these things came into focus, hearing what the doctors had to say at the VA, now in my current role, talking with you and having this conversation, it's really just, it's such a huge part of how patient care and that doctor relationship has changed and really bettered. It has gotten so much better. And I'm so thankful for that, especially, doctors like you as well, who really do have that connection with patients and caring for them.
Yeah, I think, one thing I try to really harp on, especially when I'm talking with colleagues, is taking care of ourselves isn't selfish, because the reality is it has ripple effects. Our family, I see it with my kiddos, wanting to lift some weights with me or on their little baby Peloton, whatever. But also then on our patients too, you can show up better and be more present with them when you aren't burnt out.
I totally agree. It's like what outlet works for you?
Absolutely. Now, I see a beautiful sparkly crown and sash in the background. And I don't know that we mentioned, this is how we met, was through our pageant sisterhood through Dr. World Productions. But I would love to hear about your current role, what you're doing, what's on the horizon.
Oh gosh, I am excited for this upcoming pageant season. So currently holding the title of Miss Achievement Nation's Capital USA. And I'm thrilled to be able to represent, because it's the first that's been here in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. And it's really exciting to be able to bring my platform, being a living organ donor, to this stage. And now that advancements are happening within the last few days of getting the news about my liver donation, it's really cool to be able to share that with people who are following along on the journey too. But I'm excited to continue advocating, working in these type of spaces. So it's just amazing to know that whatever comes up, I certainly am a huge advocate in working with the American Kidney Foundation as an ambassador, working with donor outreach for veterans. So those are some of the activities that I'll be doing sooner, hopefully, and just keeping active in that space. And then, of course, continuing on with veteran organizations. So there's a lot of good opportunities around here. Now I'm in the prep season as we get closer to competition time. So focusing on that and just keeping people updated and ensuring that they have the opportunities to follow along with whatever things are coming up.
So when is the pageant?
So we are having the pageant. Ours is in July. And so we'll have all of our video auditions, all the components really that go along because everything's done through video. So we'll have all of that completed and turned in. We'll have our live interviews about a month prior, and then we'll have all the results and the official ceremony in July. So I'm very excited. I'm looking forward to sharing this with my fellow sisters and queens. And so it's an exciting time.
It is. It's just a fun group of really amazing humans that we get to, hang out with both virtually and occasionally in real life. And you'll be competing for the title of Ms. Achievement. Is it Ms. Achievement or Ms. Achievement USA? Awesome.
Yep, that's it.
Great.
Yes.
Well, we are super excited to cheer you on. Where can people follow you and connect with you?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram. I'm at Linds_Gutierrez. And then, of course, you can find me on my Facebook page at Mrs. Nation's Capital Achievement USA 24. I know that's a mouthful, so I feel like
we'll have
any combination
of the show notes so they can just click on the hyperlink and go hit follow.
Perfect. And that's where you can follow along with my journeys on both of those platforms. I have several journeys going on between volunteering and then just community service and whatever else may be happening. I have a lot happening, and I always like to share that with others. I feel like sharing our testimonies is a big part of moving forward in life.
Absolutely. And we'll link to Dr. World Productions too, in case anyone wants to join us. They're not sponsoring this episode, but we love working with them and working with Diana. She's an awesome director, and it's been a really fun. I was never in a sorority in college, so I feel like I'm making up for it now.
Lots of time for sure. I certainly can empathize with that.
Well, thank you so much, Lindsay. This has been so fun. I can't wait till we get to meet again, and maybe we'll have our, extra fancy lashes and hair and sparkles going.
Oh, I know, right? That would be amazing. I would love to have that.
Sounds great. Well, thank you again. Take care.
Of course. Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.
If you are loving this mix of self-discovery and science found here on the Becoming Immune Confident podcast, I'd love to invite you to sign up for my email list. Hop over to drkarawada.com and hit subscribe to ensure you don't miss out on any insights into new immune system science or how we can harness healing through our daily habits. Are you ready to feel confident, energized, and more like that BA that you used to be? Here's how we can work together. Jennifer, an autoimmune dietitian, and I, board-certified immunologist, have put together the one and only Becoming Immune Confident comprehensive course, coaching, and community membership. What we do is we help women with misbehaving immune systems reclaim control over their health while minimizing fatigue, fog, and pain, all caused from too much inflammation. So if you are ready to have confidence and clarity around your immune system health, and a sense of certainty knowing that you are doing the best for your health and the health of your family, hop over to immuneconfident.com for details on how we can work together. We can't wait to connect. Hey there, amazing listeners. Before we wrap up today's episode, I want to take a quick moment to ask for your support. If you're enjoying the content of the Becoming Immune Confident podcast we're bringing you week after week, there's a simple but incredibly impactful way you can show your appreciation. You see, leaving a review is like giving us a virtual high five, and it helps our podcast reach even more people who could benefit from the valuable insights, entertainment, and inspiration we strive to provide week after week. So if you're finding value in what you hear, here's what you can do. Open up your podcast app, whether you're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any other platform, and give us a glowing 5-star review. We're dedicated to bringing you the best, and your feedback helps us fine-tune our content to suit your interests and needs. But hey, don't stop there. If you have a moment, leaving a few kind words in the review section goes a long way too. Share what you love about the podcast, your favorite episodes, or how it's made a positive impact on your life. Your words not only brighten our day, but they also encourage others to join our incredible community. Remember, every 5-star review and every word of encouragement counts. It's like fuel to keep us creating, innovating, and striving to make your listening experience even better. So if you're up for it, show us some love by leaving us that virtual high five in the form of a 5-star review today. And a huge shout out to all of you who have already taken the time to do so. You rock. Thank you for being a part of our podcast journey, and we can't wait to keep bringing you more amazing episodes in the future. Until next time, keep shining and keep listening and keep on building that confidence in yourself and your immune system health. Take care.